Welcome to the Secret Formula of Femininity for women who want to live a more feminine, fun, and fabulous life. I'm Dr. Nicole Monteiro, your host on this weekly journey to unlocking your inner radiance, nurturing fulfilling relationships, and becoming the best version of yourself. Welcome everybody to the Secret Formula of Femininity. I am your host, Dr. Nicole, and welcome to episode 1. I am so excited to have you here and to dive right in so that we can unlock, yes, we are unlocking the secrets to femininity. Just so you can know a little bit about me, and I'm going to get into my story in a minute, but I am a licensed psychologist, a certified life coach, a professor, author, and speaker. But some of my most cherished roles include being a mom, a wife, a daughter, and really being able to exude my womanhood in each of these roles. And part of my story is that I had to really come to understand the power of my feminine essence, my feminine energy, my femininity. And so that's what this podcast is all about. We are literally going to be unlocking a lot of the secrets of womanhood that too many of us were not taught, right? Too many of us were set on a path where we were told that we couldn't be feminine, or even if we weren't told directly, it was implied and that messaging was sent that in order to accomplish certain goals or do certain things that we had to abandon that feminine part of ourselves. And so this show is really about reclaiming the feminine. I know you hear a lot of people talking about the divine feminine, and this is really about reclaiming our birthright, ladies. And we're going to get into all aspects of the beautiful state of womanhood, what it means to be a woman, what it means to really tap into your femininity, both inside and outside. And it's a holistic 360 look at healthy womanhood, powerful femininity, and really learning to transform your relationships and enhance your relationships through getting in touch with your femininity. So I am so glad that you're here. Every week, we will look at it as an unveiling. We are pulling back the veil on a particular issue or topic or mindset, something that you need to really be the curtain to be pulled back or unveiled in order for you to really tap into the power of your femininity. Okay. Sometimes you will just be me solo. And then sometimes we're going to have some expert guests that are really going to go deeper into a topic that we may have already talked about. And here's a surprise. I am going to be answering questions. I already have some questions today from people who had some anonymous questions that they wanted answered, but also we're going to be doing from time to time some live coaching of women who are looking to enhance parts of their relationship with their partners or even their relationship with themselves. Okay, so it'll be me, but we will also have some guests and some live coaching on the podcast. So let's dig in. I told you that each week it would be an unveiling. And today I want to unveil a little bit about my own story and why feminine energy and femininity why I am so passionate about it right now, right? I don't look at it as just something frivolous that it's about hair and makeup and all of these things. I look at it as something that literally not only saved me from burnout, but saved my marriage, my relationships, other friendships, and really made my relationships with my daughters so powerful. So as you can tell, I see femininity as really the key to enhancing and improving and supercharging your relationships. Okay. So I told you I would tell you a little bit about my story. Tell me if you recognize yourself in this. Think about a woman who has hit all the marks, right? All the things that you were supposed to do. Do well in school, especially if you're like a Gen X older millennial, is concentrate, focus on school, focus on your achievement, hitting all the markers, all of the milestones, being the one that was able to achieve and be successful, at least on certain metrics, certain things that they measure it by, like school, career, and doing the things that you were supposed to do. However, imagine that just because you hit all of those markers, you were not necessarily fulfilled inside. And actually, part of being able to reach that level of success and for people outside to be like, oh, like for me in particular, oh, she was able to get her PhD really quickly right after undergrad. She went straight into her career. She moved up. Now we know her. She's married. She has 2 kids. She has her own practice, all of these things. But if you are like other high achieving women, you understand that those things by themselves don't necessarily mean you are going to be fulfilled inside. And actually, a lot of those things, especially if you're going just by how they look externally, a lot of those things will have you on a hamster wheel if you're not tapping within. They will have you on a hamster wheel that will then lead to burnout. And that is exactly where I was roughly 10 years ago. Burnout. And I always give this example, right? Like feeling like when you talk to women, and a lot of us say we have felt like we've been carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. And particularly Black women and other women of color will say that the pressures of being a representative of your group and doing well and all of that, it can literally feel like you are carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. It really can feel like that. And it's not supposed to feel like that. But if you are burnt out for long enough, or it gets to that point for long enough of a time, and you find yourself around other people and other women who glorify the hustle and glorify the grind, sometimes you won't even blink at the fact that you are walking around feeling like you're carrying a weight on your shoulders. And I always give the example of working with my trainer at the gym, right? There's all of these exercises, especially when you're doing weight and resistance training, where you're trying to get stronger, build your core, right? And there were certain exercises, for example, when I would be doing plank or push-ups, where my trainer would put these heavy weights, 30, 25, sometimes 40-pound weights, and put it on my shoulders and use that to help me strengthen my core. Now, those weights would only be there for 30 seconds, 40 at the max, right? At least on my level. And that was fine because doing it for a short time builds core, builds resistance, resilience. If we talk about it on a broader scale, it builds resilience. But we are not meant to carry those kinds of weights consistently. That's supposed to be intervals, like very short intervals. That's interval training. So carrying that type of weight and feeling like you're doing it just nonstop, continually, is unhealthy. And what's even more unhealthy is not even realizing that that's not normal. And that's where so many of us are. And that's where I was. It wasn't until I was like really realizing that I've just felt disconnected. And I tell the story where one day I was driving I think I was picking my daughter up from daycare and driving. At that time, she was going twice a week. There was a chance for us to just do our thing, get some time away or whatever. She was about 2 years old. And I was driving from my university where I was teaching and going to pick her up and then go back home. I do not remember that trip. Like I was so much on autopilot at that point where I just felt like I looked up and I was at point A and somehow I got to point C. And that's when I said, wait a minute, I'm too outside of myself. I'm just going through the motions, disconnected, not even being present. I didn't really have the words for it, but I just knew I didn't like how it felt. And those were the two images that I had. Me feeling like there were weights on my shoulders that were just always there, and me feeling like I was literally just going through the motions. And it made me think about years earlier, just traveling to places like in Ethiopia and West Africa and the Middle East, and realizing how for a lot of women, ease was incorporated into their day. Rest was incorporated into their day. So time to, like you hear in Spain, they do a siesta, time for afternoon tea, time to just sit around and talk with other women where you're not just doing. And I was reflecting back on that, and I was like, that's what I need in my life. This whole hamster wheel, feeling disconnected, feeling like the weight of the world is on my shoulders, but not understanding why. I felt like something is amiss, something is wrong. And I know we call it burnout. That's what it was, right? It's a state of just complete depletion that it's almost like you're in a state of constant exhaustion, but it's not really physical exhaustion. It's mental exhaustion. It's emotional exhaustion. But for me, I realized it was actually disconnection from my feminine energy, from my femininity, right? And how I realized that is, first of all, I felt like at that point in my life, I wasn't really in sisterhood and connection with other women who were living in ease. I was around other women, but like I said, if other women are doing the hustle and the grind and glorifying that, then you pick up your environment. As they say, you are the sum of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And if you're around a lot of other people who are just hustling and grinding or just in survival mode, then you're going to pick that up without really, even if it's unconsciously. And so I called it not just a burnout, but like a disconnect from the feminine, a disconnect from rest and believing that ease is something that should be a part of my day daily, regardless of everything else going on, right? It was a disconnect from the slowness that the feminine requires in order to get in touch with and listen to intuition and to really lean into what your gut is telling you, not just what is going on up here. So to me, the burnout was more of a disconnect. Remember I told you I was driving and I got from point A to point C and I didn't even remember it? That is due to a disconnect of being present, a disconnect from ease and really just latching on to the hustle. And so once I understood it like that I really needed to reconnect to my feminine and honor my femininity, that's when I realized that it wasn't just the same old remedies where they talk about burnout and do this and do that, that it was going to be something that had to happen on a deeper level. And I realized that so much of the messages about success they were masculine messages, honestly, because success for me, I realized what I valued was a holistic success where I could really be my natural soft self, right? That I could still assert myself even though my voice is soft, that I could still be a leader while I was able to listen, observe, and have good skills as a follower, that I could be able to honor my intuition and my creativity, not just the analytical and logical, so-called logical. The feminine is able to incorporate all of it. But for so many of us, we have been given the message or told directly to suppress the most powerful parts of it. So it really was a reconnection to the feminine, to ease, to softness. And that's how I got so deeply into soft communication. Because here's another thing. When you are burnt out, especially as a wife and as a mother, what you end up doing is you end up moving at such a pace where you're impatient. You're impatient, you're barking orders, your tone of voice is sharp, and you're letting it be known that, okay, I'm about business and I don't have time for that. But what that does is that doesn't necessarily draw the people that you care about most close to you. When you're barking orders, you're keeping people at bay and you're like putting up a wall. And a lot of times as women, we need help. Not a lot of times, all the time, we need help. But we have to learn how to be softer and gentler with ourselves, and then also how to practice soft communication and draw the people that we care about closer to us so that they want to help us, not just want to help us, but that they know exactly how to help us, right? You can't make somebody want to do something, but a lot of times your spouse, your kids, your family, they actually want to see you in a more relaxed state. They just don't necessarily know how. So that softer communication is not just about the other person, it's about also you being able to get the support that you need. So all of that is to say that my whole stint with burnout was really due to a disconnect from my femininity and my feminine energy. And once that clicked for me, like everything just started to unfold, right? My husband noticed a difference. Everything started to unfold, okay? My kids noticed a difference. Everything started to unfold, but more importantly, I felt the difference. I truly felt it. So it was from a state of disconnect, carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, or feeling like I was, to giving myself permission to let all of that go, get out of the mindset of the strong superwoman, and lean into the softer parts of myself. And the parts of myself that wanted ease and rest and not hustle and grind. Okay. So you think about this, right? I want to hear from you, the listeners and the viewers. Whenever you have an insight, please do not hesitate to leave a comment. And if you have a question, I will answer it. But I know for a fact, after not just doing my inner work on myself and my feminine work on myself, but really working with so many other women and teaching them the formula too. But it starts with the mindset. So I want to hear from you as well. Like, what has your journey been like? Or are you just starting on your journey? We probably have to back it up a little bit to even define femininity. And I've been talking about this stuff for years, and I know it feels like it's a buzzword. And I want to invite you to really lean into it, even if you're a little bit skeptical, because I've heard some people say, oh, I'm so like, there's no masculine, there's no feminine. We all have masculine and feminine. And why are we talking about this, right? We are different. This is my premise. We are different as men and women. The feminine and the masculine are different. And what has happened though is that we have either narrowly defined femininity or misunderstood it or just totally have women suppressing it. All right. So what is femininity? It's deeper. It's deeper than appearances. I know we talk about that. And that's one aspect of it. Everything has a visual element. So there is a visual component of femininity in terms of how you present yourself and how it's different from the masculine. One of the visual things or appearance things about femininity is just caring about your appearance. I'm saying part of the feminine is admiring things that feel good, that look good, that appear good. And that's up to you what that means to you. But femininity is so much deeper than that. It's really about, and I wrote this down, right? It is not just what's external or societal stereotypes. It's about embracing certain qualities such as empathy, intuition, creativity, nurturing, and vulnerability. Think about it. The feminine is what gives birth. to life, gives birth, right? Gives birth to life, brings forth life. Of course, we need the masculine to make it happen, but we bring forth life. So our energy is very creative. We also have a very receptive energy where we are able to receive from the masculine. And that is very powerful because when we are able to be in a mode of receiving, we are able to expand ourselves. But empathy, intuition, this is the part where when I talked about my story and many women's stories of focusing on achievement, sometimes you're told to just do the analytical, logical thing and cut yourself off from your intuition. Your intuition is your gut. And there's actually so much research now that talks about how the gut is, there's a connection, there's a brain gut connection. You guys, I'm a professor, so I love to sometimes I'll go into teaching mode, but I still like to make it fun. But there is a connection between the brain and the gut. So even when you're listening to your intuition, know that is real. Your gut will send messages that are not through words, but it will connect to your brain. And so when you have a quote gut feeling about something, by the time you recognize it, it's perceptible to your brain. And you got to listen to that. Your gut feeling, your intuition then will show up in feelings, being able to observe certain energies, getting that feeling. That's the only way I can describe it. Is like you have a feeling about how something is or a decision you want to make. Now, we're going to talk in some future episodes about how to know the difference between your intuition or your gut and like a trigger. For some of us who have been in traumatic situations, we don't always, you got to understand how not to overreact. But your gut is the core way of giving you information about the world, about people. That's something that's very ancient in us. So you need to trust your gut. Your gut is your compass. And especially in terms of being a feminine woman, your gut will tell you before the words or before the logic and other people come and put words or make it sound so logical. You knew that in your gut, right? So that's why women tend to be great advisors. The feminine allows you to listen and take in information and make sense of it and be able to advise. A lot of times we're used to admiring the outer power, the masculine, like the strength of what the outer strength, but the true strength is the inner strength. The true strength is the strength of the feminine that is able to guide and understand and see the big picture, right? So intuition is so powerful. Creativity, I talked about that, nurturance. And nurturance is not just giving yourself away and being drained because you're taking care of everybody else and you don't have boundaries. No, but it is our nature to want to nurture. I am in the process of working on my garden, and there's so much, I see the parallels with taking care of my pets or raising my kids or nurturing my marriage. You have to learn to observe and care for it and tend to it and know when and how. Right now, where I am, we're in the midst of a heat wave, and you have to know when and how to tend to your garden, when and how to water it because it is so hot. You've got to get that right balance. And it requires you to have the attention to be able to nurture. So nurturance is a beautiful thing. Now, here's where a lot of women tend to go wrong with it. Or I won't say wrong, but this is where a lot of women tend to want to reject it because they have not had healthy boundaries. And so they feel like they are just being drained because they're being asked to be selfless and to give and nurture, and no one's pouring back into them. They don't know how to ask to be poured back into. They don't know how to pour back into themselves. So it feels like a one-way street. But remember, I said the feminine is really about receiving. So it needs to be reciprocal. You need to be able to ask for what you need and receive that help and that support and things that you need. Okay. So nurturance is a beautiful thing. It is not bad at all. It's just that when it's one-sided and you don't have boundaries and you don't have communication, that's where it can feel burdensome for some women. Okay. The other thing is vulnerability. That is key. And I, like many women, had to learn that. And I coach so many women in terms of not being afraid to be vulnerable, especially in your relationship and in communicating. Sharing your feelings, sharing that you're not okay, not always trying to put up a facade. I've had some friends and people I've worked with that talk a lot about imposter syndrome or talk about how people have to code switch. And all of that is exhausting because it's like you're wearing a mask. You're wearing a mask and you feel like you can't be your authentic self. And when you're not your authentic self, you're disconnected, you're cut off, and you just feel like you're not yourself. And so vulnerability is the antidote, is the key. And the more vulnerable you're able to be, it's actually a sign of how strong you are. So we've got it all twisted in a way in society. And even with a lot of masculinity, people think masculinity is not being vulnerable. Ladies, let me share something with you. In your relationship, you need to establish a safe place for your man to be vulnerable. Just because he's masculine and you want a masculine man and you want to be protected and provided for, that man needs to be poured into as well. And he needs a safe space to be vulnerable. I was watching, it was a good interview a while ago with Nia Long and Jeezy. And he was just talking about the need for Black men to have this vulnerable space and this safe space. And I just loved the conversation. So that's a bit of an aside. That vulnerability, though, in order to open up a space for someone else to be vulnerable, guess what? You have to be vulnerable first. And it usually starts with being vulnerable with yourself. Loving those parts of yourself that stop trying to be perfect. Loving the parts of yourself that made mistakes and didn't get it right and wasn't caught up in patterns and toxicity or whatever the case may be. To know that at your core, you are still lovable and loved and worthy and powerful, that allows you to let down the mask and let yourself be vulnerable. Let yourself be vulnerable. And communication is key. Think about it in any realm of communication, even in politics. Politicians that really connect with the people, there's a part of them that they're like able to be a bit vulnerable. That what helps people to connect is being able to access their vulnerability, to really tap into their vulnerability. And so what that looked like for me was being more able to share exactly how I was feeling, especially when I wasn't feeling so good. I'm tired. I'm scared. I'm overwhelmed. I don't feel so good, right? Using words that don't explain, but actually demonstrate, just show what's going on with you. I'm angry. I'm sad. That hurt me. I don't know what to do with what you told me. Those are just some phrases that help you to express your vulnerability versus sometimes we can get overly intellectual, right? I want to think of an example. One time somebody reached out to me and they were describing how a person did something. It was really horrible. And so what this person told me was, that made me really curious. And I was like, were you curious? Or from the situation, it sounds like you were probably hurt. And lo and behold, she was like, yes. And she said how it had just always been hard for her to use feelings words. So she would try to put like a barrier up and make it sound other than what she felt, right? So that vulnerability is really key. And tapping into it is going to be hard, especially if you've been raised to be a superwoman, a strong Black woman, and really value things like words like strong, resilient. Like these words, these are great words. There's nothing wrong with them. But you have to know that there needs to be balance. So with every strength you have, there's other times when you don't feel so strong. With every time that you keep pushing through, there are times that you need to pull back and rest and have more ease. So it needs to be more balanced. And the vulnerability is the part that will connect you to your feminine energy. It's really a strength. It's a strength of your femininity. So it's not just about the outer look, because as I said, there's some beautiful women out here and they have put so much emphasis on the external. But at a certain point, it doesn't matter how much lipstick you put on a pig. Guess what? This is my favorite phrase. My friends laugh at me. It doesn't matter how much lipstick you put on a pig, it is still a pig. And so if we only focus on the external, then it doesn't matter how you look. It's going to be like this fragile thing that's going to crack eventually because there's no substance underneath. So your femininity is really about being authentic, learning to express your needs and your emotions, honoring your unique strengths, which are not always the strengths that society says. Like a strength is, girl, you don't cry, you don't let people, you always have a clap back, you don't let people get over on you, right? Like a lot of times those are things, those external things are what we see as strengths. But there's other strengths, like the strength of knowing how to have inner peace, knowing how to be the bigger person when you need to. I call it strategic understanding of what it means to be the bigger person. There's strength in knowing that you don't always have to confront every single person. There's strength in knowing that you don't always owe an explanation to everyone. You don't have to, right? So those are some of the ways that you can honor your unique strengths. And your femininity is powerful because it really lets you dig a little deeper and connect with yourself, which is then going to help you to have deeper connections, especially in your romantic relationship, ladies. Like, it's all about connection. So many other things are possibly going to fade and go up and down, whether it's looks, whether it's ability, sometimes even wealth. There are all of these things that we put such a premium on, that when those things, when there's peaks and valleys, what's going to sustain you through the valleys? It's the connection. And that's where your femininity comes in. So I want to tell you 4 key benefits to embracing your feminine energy. One is you will have increased self-confidence. That's right, because you're honoring your true self, your unique strengths, and you're learning to express yourself. All of that leads to greater self-confidence. And you have a greater sense of your self-worth. Number 2, it will enhance your relationships. It helps you to have more empathy and connection, like I just said, and you will build more meaningful connections that aren't superficial. Again, if you want something to last, look at all of these superficial relationships we see crumbling all around us, whether it's social media, celebrity, and of course, we don't know the full story of what's going on behind a lot of that. But we do know a lot of these things are just superficial, whether they meant it to be superficial and fake or not, or it was unconsciously that because they hadn't worked on themselves. Either way, things that are not, don't have substance, they tend to crumble, okay? Number 3, the third benefit of embracing your femininity is you actually develop greater emotional resilience. Because you're able to tap into your gut and your intuition and you understand your emotions and your emotional reactions, and you're able to embrace your vulnerability so you don't always have to have that mask up, it helps you to actually navigate life's challenges with more grace and ease and strength. And finally, last but not least, benefit of embracing your femininity is your creative expression. By definition, the feminine energy is a creative energy. So when you're able to lean into that and take off the mask and really tap into your authentic self, you are able to express yourself. And it doesn't mean that you have to be an artist. I have a background in dance. And just even with that, when you are more freed up within yourself, you will, whatever it is that you do, whether it's talking or teaching or cooking or gardening, I'm not talking about being a professional artist. I'm saying whatever it is that you do, you are able to put more of yourself in it, and it frees up your creative expression. So those are 4 key benefits of your femininity. So let's talk about some actionable tips. I am going to leave you each episode with some actionable tips, because this is all fine and great to talk about, and I could sit here and talk to you all for hours about it, but I want you to go home with some things that you can put into practice. I'm going to give you 4 actionable tips. One is to make sure you practice self-care. You're not going to be really fully in tune with your feminine if you're not taking care of yourself. And you have to do things that nurture your mind, your body, and your spirit. You have to eat. You have to sleep, right? Like on a basic level. You can't burn the candle at both ends. And I was just talking to some women in one of my coaching programs about something called a joy habit tracker. This is really important as a way of monitoring and making sure you're engaging in self-care. Self-care, it could be the big things, the vacations and the relaxation and the spas. I love all of that. In fact, I'm going to do an episode on going to a traditional Korean spa to up your skin game. So I love all of that. But self-care can literally be free. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. And one of the things is making sure that you have habits that bring you joy each and every day. And something that I love to do is drink a hot drink, even though we're in a heat wave, but starting my morning in a slow way where I get to sip my tea, my coffee drink, and just feel it all, be present with it all. And that brings me joy, and it's a form of self-care. So I want you to really understand that self-care doesn't have to be this huge thing, but it's something that you have to be consistent with. Number 2, connect with your emotions. And that you might need to make, if you have suppressed your emotions or there's things that you don't want to face because you feel like they're going to be too overwhelming, you have to get out of that habit. And you, even if it's just expressing your emotions to yourself in writing through journaling, that's going to help you, or talking to someone that you really trust and that can allow you to be vulnerable. The 4th tip is to learn to cultivate your intuition. One of the best ways to do this is to sit quietly with yourself and listen to yourself. We are so used to moving and hustling and bustling, going from here to there. Do we ever, how often, I'm not going to say do we ever, but how often do we sit and allow ourselves to just be with ourselves? You can call it prayer, meditation. Sometimes it's just sitting still. If you are a mom, if you're a busy mom, it could be sitting in your car. If you're a mom, the car sometimes is our best friend, because before we go back in the house or wherever we have to go, we might have to sit quietly. But take time to be intentional about sitting with yourself. You can start with 2 minutes up to 5 minutes of quiet, noticing what comes up for you. What feelings do you get? Voices, like, what is the inner voice telling you? And then finally, tap into your creativity. One of my favorite things is this gardening thing. I love it. I love it. But one of my favorite things is to tell people, women, get an adult coloring book. Read that romance novel, right? And try to make up your own romance story. Do something that taps into you creating something that doesn't have to do with being productive, doesn't have to do with work or any of those things. So those are your actionable tips. I want to always leave room for Q&A. I'm going to answer one of the questions. And one of the questions was, how can I balance my feminine and masculine energies in my daily life? Ooh, I love that question. I think that's great. So it's about honoring all sides of yourself and knowing that a lot of what you need to get through this modern life is hectic, right? Whether it's even just driving or going from here to there, it requires so much of that masculine energy. So a lot of us are well versed in how to go into our masculine. What you're really going to have to do is to learn to be aware of when you're leaning into that when you could lean more into the feminine? For example, are you ready to confront every single thing? Or are there times where, as I said earlier, you could ask yourself, does this need a response from me? Do I have to put my energy into this? So being really conscious about if you're overly leaning into the masculine because that's what you're used to doing. If you're used to spending most of the day in a highly analytical and driven mode, then take time for a walk. Take time to go to your coloring book. Pause and get up and stretch or do some movement. Take time to tend to something that is fun to you. Call one of your friends, look at something that's going to make you laugh, but break the cycle of being too much in that state where you don't know how to come back to the feminine. So being mindful of it and taking small breaks, allowing yourself to do things that aren't always about just being driven, analytical, hustle, and grind. All right. I am so happy that you all joined me for this first episode, and I want to make sure that you don't forget to subscribe. Send me your questions. I will answer your questions. I hope this is a movement for all of us women from all walks of life to truly value and embrace our femininity and understand that it's a journey. It's not, wait, am I feminine yet? No, it's a journey. It's something that you're going to have to keep walking. You are going to have to keep practicing, especially if you were so long just in an unbalanced state where you were suppressing your femininity. This is Dr. Nicole, and again, thank you for joining me for the Secret Formula of Femininity. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or leave a comment, and share if this has been valuable to you. Embrace your power, let your feminine energy shine, and always nurture yourself. That was episode 1. That's a wrap. Oh my God. Thank you guys for joining.